All right, everyone, it is 3:30, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us this month for Direct Connect. This month, we're going to talk about using data in evaluation. My name is Madeline. I work in the Member Services Department at Youth M.O.V.E. National, and I'm joined today by Bree. Bree, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Maddie. Hello, I'm Brianne Masselli with Youth M.O.V.E. National. I'm the Director of Technical Assistance and Evaluation, and so excited to be on Direct Connect with you today, Maddie.
Awesome. Yeah, so Bree's going to be our presenter. Thank you so much for introducing yourself. If you didn't know, we here at Youth M.O.V.E. National host these Direct Connects in partnership with the National TA Network for Children's Behavioral Health, which is operated through the University of Maryland. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. I just want to make a quick note that we do have a survey that we ask that you all complete once our webinar today is over with. We're going to go ahead and put the link for you in the chat box, so feel free to open it there. You'll also have another chance to complete this at the end of the webinar. When we close it out, it will pop up automatically. And then we will also put a link with the webinar recording, so you'll have another chance then. So please take the time to let us know how we did so that we can continually improve our quality. So welcome everyone. We would love to hear from you all about who is in the audience today. So if you could let us know who you are and where you're from, it would give us a feel to see what we've got going on. So you'll see on your screen we have this lovely polling option, so go ahead and just click on the screen to let us know who's here. We'll leave this up for about 30 seconds or so just to get a feel and see who's in our audience. Looks like we have a lot of Youth M.O.V.E. people. That's awesome. Thanks for coming, guys. And we also have people introducing themselves in the chat box. Feel free to introduce yourself there if you like to as well. So it looks like we have a pretty good variety of people that have joined us today. Thank you everyone for coming and for letting us know who you are. Our next poll, we'd love to know what your role is in your agency. So just take a look at this list and let us know which one you think you most closely identify with. Awesome. Looks like we have some people from the state government that are joining us, some people from their mental health agencies, some youth and young adults, technical leadership. Cool. So it looks like we have a nice variety of people here. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. So if you didn't know, this Making Data Work is actually a series. This is part 2 of the series. We were just curious to know who in the audience was there for part 1. So if you were able to make it to the last Making Data Work for You series, go ahead and click yes. And if not, click no. And then we'll sort of know where you are as an audience and what we need to cover. Well, it looks like a lot of you were here for the last one. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming back for part 2. We'll try to make it just as exciting as part 1. So some of our learning goals today, just to go over briefly before we get started with our content, we're going to be talking about getting an understanding of what is continuous quality improvement, something that you might have heard referred to as CQI, and discover what this looks like when we're actually practicing it in our own communities. So it's more than just collecting data. We're going to talk about how to make sense of the data, how to tell stories with the data that you've collected once you've been able to make sense of it, and then how to take that data and those stories and present them so that they can be used for program expansion and sustainability in your own community. So we're really going to look at not just gathering numbers, but how can we take this information and use it to improve our own services. So the first section that we're going to cover today, Bree is going to talk to us about the basics of continuous quality improvement. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Bree.
Great. Thanks, Maddie.
Absolutely. And if throughout the presentation you have any questions, comments, or find anything relatable, just feel free to enter it in the public chat.
Yes, and I strongly encourage you guys, as we go through the presentation, I'd love to kind of take questions as we go and incorporate your needs and understanding right within the presentation versus just waiting for the end. And Maddie will kind of help kind of facilitate some of the chat box conversation and pause me when we might want to talk in depth a little bit more. So please feel free to use that function. I'm excited to see that many of you guys were on part 1. Just in regards to kind of understanding and kind of the foundational information about kind of becoming a data-informed organization. We are hearing at Youth M.O.V.E. National that many of our Youth M.O.V.E. chapters are hungry and wanting and needing to start collecting more data so that they can show the value of their work and utilize that to help build their sustainability, as well as to expand their partnerships and improve upon what it is that they offer at the local level, county level, or state level, depending how your youth-run organizations are set up. And often there's many of you all that came on as, you know, in leadership roles, identified as leadership roles in the polling question, but this would also kind of help understand your role as a supportive adult ally in cultivating the youth partnerships that you're working with to really be data informed in how they're utilizing their time, their talents, and their voice within your system of care work. So in the first part 1, we talked about the building blocks for data-informed organizations. And so we're not going to spend a ton of time going over each aspect of clarity, capacity, and culture because we went over that in the first one. And as you look in the chat box, there's a link where you would be able to watch or share the recording. So if you were one of the folks that is just joining us for the first time, it might be some extra homework that you have after today's webinar. And so just briefly, clarity is really important in the work. Having a clear purpose, mission, and vision helps leadership understand what the work will look like. And then making sure that you understand when the work has been identified, do you have the capacity to do that work and do that well? And what additional resources might you need to improve the professional development and build the capacity for data collection within your organization. And so clarity and capacity, we spent a lot of time last time. And the last is cultivating a culture of learning, which really lends itself into continuous quality improvement and really looking at what are we learning through the work that we are doing and how are we continuously improving upon that. So CQI is a process where you routinely set goals, collect data, review that data, and take action as a result, and then start over again. So it's a continuous cycle of self-reflection within your organization. There are a lot of different models out there, but they all have the basic principles of reflection, looking at where you're at currently and how do you improve as you move forward. So just for a little humor, there's a little comic here that says, we're ready to begin the next phase of keeping things exactly the way they are. This is not continuous quality improvement. Continuous quality improvement allows for and encourages adjustment and change when needed. Most problems are the results of a flawed process, not flawed people. So a lot of the times in the work that we do, we try really, really hard to implement a really strong event where a lot of young people might participate. We're trying to, create an outreach opportunity, but yet we might not see the results that we wanted from that. And it doesn't mean that the people that put the energy and effort into the activity, it doesn't mean that they did something wrong. It means that perhaps their process didn't meet the needs or wasn't established in a approach that would promote the result that they want to see. And so the goal of CQI is to improve the process, not to assign blame on why something worked or didn't work because of a particular person or action. It's important to note that not all changes lead to improvements, and that's where data comes in. Data is essential for figuring out the baseline. Where are you starting? And being able to look for the quantifiable and measurable aspects of improvement. Data is the center of continuous quality improvement, and it helps make sure we don't end up like this guy who's getting ready to start doing the same thing over and over and sticking with the status quo. And I think one of the things that's great about Youth Voice is that infusing Youth Voice into your work, that in itself is going to rock the boat and change up the traditional business as usual mentality that we often see in the systems that we work in. And so just the thought of utilizing your own personal lived experience and your talents that you have for this work and passion and partnering with a system that's not used to change, they're used to kind of doing business as usual, that in itself will be a process. And understanding how to maximize that and use data to encourage the change oftentimes creates really well-balanced partnership where it's not always as frustrating and hard because you're on the same page and you're working towards the same goal, and you all understand that the action steps and the process that you'll take to get there. So what is CQI? It's a process by which an organization can strive to improve its business processes and outcomes through monitoring and analyzing data. So there's everyday tasks, and everyday tasks inform the goals that are identified for your overall organization, project, or Youth M.O.V.E. chapter. Once you've identified goals, you have to create action plans, and those action plans, by implementing those action steps, will hopefully bring you closer to the desired outcomes that you're looking for. CQI helps you make sure that the day-to-day operations, decisions, and activities of your program are connected and aligned with your mission and vision. And so it's really important that as you are working within your youth program, that everyone is on the same page with understanding your mission, your vision, what you're hoping to focus your efforts on. So that could be looking at your chapter purpose areas and creating identified goals, the action steps that you'll take, and then measuring up against what you're hoping to see for an outcome. So where does CQI fit? Before we learn more about CQI, I want to distinguish between three data-related things that often get confusing: continuous quality improvement, process evaluation, and performance management. While there are some key distinctions, they are all connected to your program operations, all of the activities you do, and your logic model. So at the center of each one of these aspects is your program operations, which is your day-to-day, as well as your logic model. So those key pieces that we mentioned before. What are your program goals? What action is needed? And what are you hoping to see for outcomes once you move those activities forward? That drives what your practice will look like and how you will evaluate and improve your process going forward. Continuous quality improvement is collecting and using data to make decisions within your organization to improve programs and process. CQI tends to be an ongoing, quick, and routine, and looks at not just key program elements, but also the factors that go into them. With organizational and staff buy-in to CQI, we start to shift the conversations from just being about an awesome event that we ran last week, which is still great and important to celebrate, to a conversation about how each program and professional is doing relative to the defined goals and objective criteria. So we start to look at not only was the event fun, but did the event help us meet our goal? The entire process occurs internally from start to finish, and you are not accountable to anyone outside of your organization to reach your goals or targets. You set the agenda and the goals related to making the organization work better for you. It is like an internal evaluation to help you improve organizationally. So continuous quality improvement tends to have quick cycles and routine. And quick cycles mean that you try on a new idea, and you set a time frame to say, in 90 days we're going to come back and we're going to look at it. And then you adjust as you go. So in 90 days, if you didn't see the result that you needed, or you learned something new about how you're implementing the process, you might change it up a little bit and say, okay, now the next 90 days we might do this. And it also helps you articulate your key program elements and factors. And it has a very much an internal focus. So process evaluation is generally an externally focused monitoring and documentation of a limited set of indicators about a project, an initiative, or a program that helps explain your outcome. Process evaluations are generally done by an external evaluator looking in who uses outcomes to determine how well you are implementing a program. It looks at programs in the long term and doesn't support a rapid, ongoing change cycle or improvement process. Typically, a process evaluation makes recommendations for improvement of program implementation to make sure that you're meeting your outcomes. While these professionally commissioned evaluations are very important, they are expensive and cannot be carried out frequently enough to serve as a real guide for ongoing decision making. So a process evaluation is long-term, it's stable, it's measuring a particular component of your program, and it is measuring that part of the program consistently. And it tends to be an external, independent researcher that might be evaluating it. So if you were ever, say you are a trained facilitator in youth mental health first aid, which many of our youth leaders implement that model or participate in facilitating and training others in that model. That has a long process evaluation. So every time someone is trained within that evaluation, there's a standardized process that is in place that is evaluating the effectiveness of youth mental health first aid. And there's an external component that each individual program has to kind of report to in order to maintain their certification and how the program is run. It's very structured and can often be long-term. And then as the national program gets that information, they may use that to shift practice, but you might not have to change your practice until much later. Whereas quality improvement was like, oh, we just did a training and it didn't work so well. What can we do to adjust now? And lastly, performance management is monitoring the process of a program towards meeting your established organizational goals. Oftentimes, this is referred to milestones or benchmarks. It tends to be an ongoing and looks at key program elements and is usually related to specific projects, programs, or contracts. and their individual goals and or deliverables. Performance management focuses on the outputs of your activities, usually related to a meeting, internal goals, or external reporting, requirements to funders and stakeholders. So just to recap, where does continuous quality improvement fit? Continuous quality improvement fits within a data-informed organization as it is quick cycles of improvement. You're able to modify your program as you go based on what you're learning from what has been implemented, and it tends to be more internal. Performance management is also ongoing. It looks specifically at a particular program and pushes you towards achieving your goals. But sometimes performance management can be internal and or external. So again, if you are, some of you signed on and said you're a technical assistance provider. So as a technical assistance provider or an expectation of your chapters to provide trainings, you might have to report to your contractor or your funder how many trainings you've done, and it's a way for that contractor to make sure that you're meeting your performance management aspects of the contract. So did you do what you said you were going to do? And if you said you're going to train 1,000 youth leaders that year, you best hope that you're tracking the data so that you can show your external funders that you met that target and that benchmark within your program. And then process evaluation. This is normally that external piece. So partnering with an external evaluator that's going to come in and do a non-biased kind of long-term evaluation related to a specific program. So we're going to play a little bit of a game here just to break it up. We just went over three different approaches, and we're going to show you samples on the screen of evaluation tools that Youth M.O.V.E. chapters often tend to utilize to collect some data. And I'm curious to know if you think it is a tool for quality improvement, if it's a tool that focuses on process evaluation, or if it's a tool that focuses on performance management. So on the screen, you see a session evaluation form, which is actually the exact session form that if you've participated in a Youth M.O.V.E. training, you may have actually filled out. So looking at this, it asks you to indicate your impression of the items listed below. It talks about the session met expectations. The participant will be able to apply the knowledge. You met the objectives, materials were distributed. So basically anything that goes into a training, this is what we're asking. So in the chat box, could you provide us an answer of what you think this evaluation tool would be helpful for? Quality improvement, process evaluation, or performance management? I'm excited. I see Cynthia already starting to type, so that's exciting. We see Alice is typing, so we'll give it some time for folks' responses to pop up before we discuss. Okay. So, see that some folks think that it would be continuous quality improvement, it would be performance management, it would be quality improvement. So how you use this data would be performance. So if you are a supervisor or you are in charge of making sure that new trainers in a Train the Trainer program are at their stellar quality as being a certified trainer, then this definitely could be utilized as a performance measurement tool and be a performance management. So if you're looking at the skill level of the facilitator being able to deliver the content, you could use the information you gather from the participants in that way. If you want to know, did people like the training? Did it meet the needs? Was it useful? Then you would be able to utilize the data and the information gathered to help you improve what the training will look like next time. So for example, the session objectives for each topic were identified and followed. If you had a lot of folks say strongly disagree, then when you get that information back, you have to sit down with your trainers and you have to say, where did we miss the mark and how can we clearly identify the objectives in a way that matches the content. So for some of this, it depends how you're going to utilize the data and how that will make your organizational decisions. So you could have it as an organizational decision that this is a solid training, people like it, it meets the standard goals, very little needs to be improved, we did a great job, let's continue doing good work. If it's performance management and you're getting ready to say, I need to certify you in a training and the evaluation is saying that, you didn't do such a great job, we need to work with you on some improvement on these pieces. So we tend to see Youth M.O.V.E programs and other youth activities constantly utilizing a simple evaluation form like this to collect information. All right, we have another one. This one is a little tricky. So here, this is actually, you'll see myself, you might see some names here that you recognize. This is an actual form that we need to submit to our contractor for a particular technical assistance and training contract that we work on. So what type of, what would this be? Would this be quality improvement, process evaluation, or performance management? Cynthia, you see this as a little bit of a needs assessment. So put in the comment box what you would see this document serving in the organization. Quality improvement, process evaluation, or performance management. Alice is saying performance management, and so is Casey. This would be performance management. So the data that Youth M.O.V.E collects here shows that each person that is working on this particular project needs to perform a certain number of hours on each one of these, like on the left-hand side, those we call them tasks. We need to provide a certain number of hours. So at the end of the month, we're able to say that each employee worked this many hours on this particular task, and that is given to an external person that is monitoring our performance as an organization. Internally, we could use it as performance management if we're in a supervisory role, and maybe these are our staff, and we want to make sure that they're allocating their time and appropriately, and so you'd be able to use the data in that way if you're a supervisor. It also could be a great way for a staff member that maybe they're putting too much effort in on one project and we haven't given them enough hours to really do the work that needs to happen, and so maybe we need to discuss what are the resources needed to officially meet the desired goal that the external contractor has for us. So we definitely internally at Youth M.O.V.E see this one as a performance management tool. Okay, so here's another one. This is another activity that we have at Youth M.O.V.E National, which is Dare to Dream, which is a very specific program. It's a project that allows kind of these like little mini grants to go out to our local Youth M.O.V.E chapters to create a local implementation project. And so we have a final participant evaluation. So at the completion of their mini-grant funding cycle, they implement a project, and then we provide an evaluation to them to see how their implementation process went and what they learned about their local community project. What would you think this would be? Is this quality improvement? Is this a process evaluation? Or is this performance management? Okay, Lachelle says process evaluation. Alice says process evaluation. Perfect, Casey. So it sounds like we definitely have some consensus. This would be a process evaluation. So us at Youth M.O.V.E. National, we want to better understand how their project was planned and implemented and want them to reflect on that experience. So we want to know about the process, both the process locally and the process of how we supported the grant program. So this does get more at kind of a program process evaluation. We might learn something about the process and try to improve upon it next time, but what we're really getting at is more of a process evaluation for our particular Dare to Dream program. So it's very specific to a program. Okay, and so this is our very last one. So here you see an example of a communication survey that Youth M.O.V.E. National sent out. And we are, as an organization, we're developing our communication strategy, and we want input from our members so that we can learn more about the best way to communicate and share information with them. What would this be? Continuous quality improvement, process evaluation, or performance management? Casey says CQI. What do others think? CQI. So Kristen, you noticed the language that we used. So as we develop, which means that there is a process that we want to use the voice of those we're engaging to develop the process. So you're absolutely right. This has not been an established process. We have a process. We want to learn from our current process to develop a new process. So it's definitely more of a CQI where we're soliciting feedback on what's currently in place, what might be better as we move forward. So this one is definitely continuous quality improvement. So when we think about continuous quality improvement, I really see it as 3 phases. We need to identify and describe what we did, and that has to be very clear. The goals, and how the event is, is it, depending what, if it's a training that we're evaluating, or it's an outreach activity or an advocacy event, we need to clearly identify and describe the event in what we're hoping we did. We'll gather some data around that, and we're going to implement the idea. So we'll analyze and test it. And when we say analyze and test, did it work? What should we change about the process? So there's some reflection that happens. And then that small test of change then turns into a potentially larger scale implementation strategy. So we're going to implement it broader, we're going to learn again, and we're going to revise. And then it kind of circles. So some see this as a plan, do, study, act approach. So if you were to think about this, and we think of a activity that young people often create early on And maybe that is creating some sort of brochure or outreach material. You're going to identify what that will look like. You're going to describe it and say it's a brochure to get more youth to join your Youth M.O.V.E. chapter. So it's going to talk about who you are as an organization, what you do, what your purpose is, and why someone will want to come and participate in your local Youth M.O.V.E. chapter. Instead of printing out 5,000 brochures and saying that it's perfect the first time around, you might print out 10. And you use those 10 brochures and you bring them to new people that aren't involved in your Youth M.O.V.E. chapter, and you ask them to look the brochure over. You're letting someone analyze it, and you're testing out, does the language make sense? Does it sound youth-friendly? Does the visual look of it look appealing? Does it make the person want to come and participate in your organization? Does it make someone want to learn more about your organization? So if you give your brochure to 10 people, you ask them to give you some feedback on it, they'll be able to tell you if the language and the look of your brochure would appeal to them to join your organization. So that helps you figure out, did it work? They might also give you feedback that might help you improve and say, well, I didn't quite understand what system of care meant. I've never heard that word before. So maybe you might want to take out some of the jargon that's in your brochure. So that way it is appealing to more people that are outside of the system of care grant, and you can teach them about system of care once they join. So maybe your change is that you'll remove the SOC acronym and that particular word, and then you test it again with another 10 young people. Once you do that and you get positive feedback that maybe nothing should change and that it looks good, then you might want to go and do a print run of 1,000. And you start utilizing the brochure. Over time, you might say, wow, we just distributed 1,000 brochures and we only got 10 new members to our chapter. You would want to learn from that and say, was it worth it for us? Was the cost of 1,000 brochures, did it give us the return that we wanted on that investment? And you might realize that it did, or maybe it didn't. And you might learn that young people don't read brochures anymore, but young people will want to be your Facebook friend or follow you on Snapchat or, connect on Twitter. So maybe you don't need a brochure. Maybe you need a, find us online infographic. And so you might learn that maybe there's a different way for that outreach strategy, and you can improve and reallocate your resources next time and put them into something that might give you a bigger bang for your buck and help you achieve your goal. So in that example, it shows that continuous quality improvement is a chain of events. It is improvement in the quality that leads to the decreased cost of the brochures because less rework, fewer mistakes, and fewer delays, and better use of people's time and material, resulting in improved productivity, improved quality, improved perhaps program offerings. It maximizes your resources, it maximizes staffing resources, and meets the direct needs of the user. And it increases internal and external communication. So when you only have limited resources, you don't want to invest all of your resources up front into the first idea. You want to start small and you want to test out that idea. And that's what's so important about continuous quality improvement. You want to start small, learn from it, improve from it, so that you know if it's worth continuing investing your time and resources in it. And you may want to identify an area for improvement and then define and describe what the current situation is. So if you set a goal that through this process, this is the number of new members we want to get, then you would be able to tie it back to, did this particular outreach strategy work? And if not, then you can continue to refine it, retest it on a small scale, and continue to make it work for you. And then you would turn it into a perhaps established process and protocol. So for step one is really identify, describe, and develop. So what are you going to do? What should we change? How can we change it? And how will we know if it works? So you would want to set a little bit of a benchmark. So let's try to break it down. The first part, called identify. First of all, in the CQI process, questions should be asked about things you really care about. So key project elements as well as the factors that go into them. In this first step, you ask, what are we doing? Should we change anything? How can we change it? And how will we know if the change worked? For example, Youth M.O.V.E. National recently went through a process of better understanding our communications with our network. We have all sorts of communications with chapters. We have e-newsletters, we have weekly chapter emails, we have chapter alerts. To describe our efforts, we looked at Google Analytics, social media likes, newsletter views, engagement in webinars, and some other data sources that we had. Then we asked, should we change anything? And we came up with a lot of great ideas. Let's add to what we do: a website, a chapter chat, webinars, individualized TA, through email, phone calls, on-site, better use of social media. These were all great ideas, but we also realized that we had a knowledge gap. We didn't know what our chapters wanted. We were missing an important piece of the information. So before moving on to the next step, we went back to the describe step, and we conducted some fact-finding through our communication survey. What do people like and actually engage with us? This information then fed into the development of a communication strategy. For communications, we have completed step one of our CQI process. So again, that's the identify, describe, and develop. So step two is the testing it out. When you don't have to commit fully in terms of organizational scope or all projects and staff, it can make the idea of change more adaptable. So for step two, the CQI cycle, you really just figure out a way to test change on a small scale. For example, one staff person or one program tries a new change. It is really important to be able to know whether the change works, so you don't skip that step in your development process. So back to our example, we ran the new activity at our next workshop, and the evaluation form showed much better feedback that time around about the about the activity that we were looking. So the example that we had where we had we got the feedback from our young people about the communication survey. We took that information, we made some changes to where we focused our energy around communications, did some change up of like how it looks, how we send it out, and we were able to make an improvement over time. I think one of the improvements was based on emails that are actually opened. We realized that if we send it out of this day of the week, more people actually open the email. So we get a bigger bang for our buck. We don't know what happens on that particular day, but people check their email. So that's the best day for people to hear what we're up to at Youth M.O.V.E. National, so we send things out on that day. So we were able to utilize their feedback on what type of information is important. We were able to utilize the data that we had related to how we were capturing how emails were going out, and use those analytics to figure out the best way to deliver the information as well as the right content. So step three, implement. Once you know a changed work, you'll want to implement that change on a full organizational scale. So all staff or all projects and programs. Then you will want to continue to monitor your data and learn about the change, moving back to the identify stage. Stages are warranted if new challenges emerge, references, and connect back to any examples. So when we think about that whole process, we continue to monitor it, and all of a sudden if something happens and we look and reference back to the data that we had 5 months ago to the data we're collecting now, and now we're starting to see within that process that maybe now people stopped checking their emails on this particular day, and they're not opening them. But yet the data is telling us that now they're opening them on Tuesdays. We could switch to Tuesdays because that's the day more people open up their emails, and then we'll get the message and the information that they need as a chapter. So over time, you're able to continuously look at your process, utilize the data that you're collecting, and continuously try to improve on your process and what you're doing so that you see the biggest return on it. And for us, that was, if we're going to send out emails, we want people to open them and get the useful information that we put into them as a communication strategy. So why CQI? CQI is really important to align activities and missions. It improves decision making. It improves quality and effectiveness of your work. It can improve productivity. It can maximize your financial and staffing resources, and it can improve communication. Sometimes in small organizations and within our chapters, we do a lot of consensus building and decision making, and sometimes we make decisions based on what we're passionate about, but we don't always have the data that says this is what the community needs. And so CQI helps us kind of take the passion for the work with what the data tells us is most needed by the youth that are engaged in our programs. It also makes sure that we don't have mission drift. So if we say we're going to engage youth to create change, and we're going to hear youth and however you guys phrase up your mission, if all of a sudden you're not doing that, CQI is going to be like, hey, you're drifting a little bit from your mission. You're moving away from what you said you're going to do. And sometimes we see this happen when funding and sustainability is at play. So oftentimes we might see mission drift so that people reinvent themselves because one project's coming to an end. So they try to reinvent themselves so they look appealing to another funder. But yet they don't always think about that process. And when you want to stay true to who you are as an organization, it would be important for them to reflect and say, do we really want to go in this direction, or do we want to stay true to who we are as an organization? CQI helps tremendously in improving productivity. Again, everyone is really, really busy, and we don't always have a lot of resources. So if we're able to establish a process that is tested and that we know works, then let's continue doing more of what works and less of what we don't know what will happen. And so that really helps us build our organizational capacity, and it can be very important for you all to understand and improve what it is that you do and your efficiency of how you do that, so that it's easy for you to write a grant and structure your program because you're very clear on what your process is, and then you'd be able to maximize staff and or the fiscal resources that go in that. And then again, you're constantly improving your communications because you're constantly looking at what the data is telling you, and utilizing that data to tell the story is important. So who benefits from continuous quality improvement? Directors and managers benefit because it helps them with program monitoring. It increases staff satisfaction. Oftentimes when you don't have your clear goals identified and you don't have a clear process for how do you get from A to Z, staff can get very frustrated. Staff can feel that they're not sure, that they're kind of flying on the seat of their pants, just doing what they think is the right thing to do, and maybe it's not. And so it's really important that when you have a CQI process in place, it makes it clearer for the staff to understand the process, on board, adopt it, and implement it. And we all like to feel confident and competent in the work that we do. So when we feel that on the job, we're definitely more satisfied versus kind of trying to wing it. It also helps staff increase their efficiency. They feel heard when new processes are being reviewed and you're gathering feedback during that testing and analyzing and improving. And so they can really contribute to, this didn't work well for us and we'd like for it to be improved, and this is how we can improve it. So it allows for your staff to have voice in what the change and the improvement looks like over time. Then the target and the priority population. So CQI really helps you address the right needs. It helps you sustain your program, and it helps you identify barriers that might be identified within your work. And so it has a multi-level impact. And so CQI is not just something that's going to benefit the person that likes numbers the most and loves to do evaluation. It really can help all staff understand their work better and understand your program better. It puts people on the same page. It makes the decision-making process feel easier because we look at data to tell us, is this working? Should we do it again, or should we wait and try something new? And so it just helps us as an organization at Youth M.O.V.E, and then we've seen the benefits at local level in the communities and in our other youth programs as well, is when they have a process in place, the work flows easier, the partnerships are clearer, and the resources are used in the most efficient way possible, which helps with sustainability. So a couple other frameworks I touched upon is that, and we talked these are different models, and Youth M.O.V.E. National has resources on each of these models and are able to work with any of you that are looking to create a CQI process within your youth efforts. We would be able to provide you resources related to these aspects. So Plan, Do, Study, Act, which is a PDSA cycle, again, is you're going to plan your activity, you're going to do small scale, and you're going to do it through small scale. You're going to study it, and you're going to see, did it work? Did it bring us closer to the desired goal? And if yes, you're going to act upon it, which means you're going to replicate it on a larger scale. That one seems to be the shortest, the sweetest, the easiest to do. We do it at Youth M.O.V.E. National quite a bit. That sometimes folks pick on me and say, Bree, we should do that as a Plan, Do, Study, Act. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, because I really think that even in your own personal life, if you're not planning and you're not doing and you're not reflecting and studying what your outcome was, then are you going to make that decision again? Probably not. And so it's beneficial in a lot of aspects. The Getting to Outcomes model is another suggested framework that helps you really identify what it is you're hoping to do, what you're looking for potential outcomes, what resources you need to do that. It's a little bit more in-depth, but it is a framework that really helps you articulate what it is you're hoping to design for a program, and then it has stages within that help you reflect from a CQI perspective. Another approach for evaluation is really kind of looking at a collective impact approach. So we hear this a lot with our youth programs, is that in some states, maybe there's 5 Youth M.O.V.E. chapters. They all are working towards reducing stigma around mental health. So when you are trying to collaborate with other youth-serving organizations that have the same goal in mind at the end that you have, you could compile your resources. You can plan together, get on the same page together, and implement the activity in the same way, and then look at the data across the board and see, was this particular event impactful? Because each of the organizations had the same desired goal in mind. So a collective impact approach might be if you're doing a collaborative anti-stigma campaign, kind of each program is going to commit, help develop, you're going to implement it, and then you would reflect back. So those are other models that they help you plan out. They help you establish what does your evaluation need to look like, and what you might want to track and measure. And then they also help you understand, were you successful? Did that action help you get closer to your desired goal? And if not, what might you change going forward if you were to replicate the program again? So if you have any interest in learning more about these, please reach out to us after the session, and we can make sure that we get you the materials. A lot of them have little workbooks that you could work through your thinking and your planning process. That can be very helpful. So on the flip side is that aside from a youth program trying to develop their own quality improvement process, we're also hearing that systems leaders and partners want to engage youth in their process of quality improvement. So this is a graphic we put together at Youth M.O.V.E. National. We currently serve on a project that focuses specifically on improving access between behavioral health and physical health. So we work with a lot of health insurance companies and plans, and we try to get things to be improved on how they're supporting one another and working together for youth and families to remain well as informed about their care. So this particular initiative wanted us to recruit young people and have them sit on a health insurance company's continuous quality improvement work group. And so we came up with these strategies that is an amazing place for young people to be. No one knows the program better, what works well, than a person that's been through the program, that's been denied for a service that they want, has struggled to get information when they need it. The struggle is that young people don't always have an understanding of what continuous quality improvement is. So finding the right young person to join that committee, sometimes the leadership of these particular committees don't really understand what youth engagement is and how to do that well. So we created this graphic. So in order to meaningfully engage youth during a CQI process, leadership must demonstrate a commitment to youth engagement. They must be on board. They must understand the value of it. They must be able to show that this is more than having a youth at the table to check a box, that the young people are going to be true partners within the quality improvement process. Once they're able to articulate the leadership of the committee of what it is that they're looking for and hoping to do, then they have to look at outreach and partnership. So within continuous quality improvement, you have an opportunity to outreach and identify an individual to sit on an existing committee, or you could partner with a youth-run organization or family-run organization or a system of care. So these external entities have an option to select and work with one person or perhaps work with a whole project. So this might help them understand, is it an advisory structure? Are you partnering with a program? Do you want broad representation of a broad group of youth voices, or are you looking for a very narrow, you want to talk to youth with this particular experience, and is it a smaller? So you really have to develop your outreach and partnership strategies so that when you're looking to improve a particular program, you're asking the people that understand. So it's hard to provide feedback if the service doesn't make sense to you. So if you created a flyer and you have the flyer translated into Spanish, and then you give the Spanish flyer to the first 5 families that walk through the door, and then you ask them, do you like the flyer? And out of the 5 families, 3 say no and 2 say yes. Well, what happens if the first 3, they don't speak Spanish? Their feedback isn't as useful to you as the feedback of the 2 people that do speak Spanish. So you want to make sure that when you are looking for feedback and you're looking at who do you engage with in the work, you're engaging the right audience. So if you're looking to improve child welfare, getting a youth who's only been involved in the juvenile justice system, their voice may not necessarily help improve the child welfare system. They may have some aspects to offer, but their experience is very different. So you want to make sure your outreach and partnership is with the right group of people to give you the right insight. Once you identify who will participate in your quality improvement change team, you'd want to educate and prepare them. So all team members should receive training on the content and have a clear understanding of the rules and expectations of the work, understand when coming to the table what they're going to do. You'll want to solicit feedback and gather data, and youth are able to provide input and contribute their lived experience at this phase. They're also able to co-facilitate focus groups or gather information about, and doing those listening sessions that might give some feedback on what could be improved within the system and then bring that back. Youth are able to review and analyze and interpret data. So it's really important for them to understand that they're not just going to be the person providing feedback or the person soliciting feedback, but they actually get to play a part in reviewing what the feedback tells them, and then being able to make suggestions for change and help with how do you want to contribute to improvement and the implementation strategies. So based on what you learned, how can we change it, and what would the next phase of implementation looks like? And that's that continued cycle that constantly is happening. And so these are just critical pieces. If you are a business organization wanting to engage youth within CQI but not quite sure how, this shows you just things to consider along the process. All right, so I'm going to pause there and see if anyone has any questions related to kind of understanding continuous quality improvement and what we've presented on so far before we jump into the next part of today's session, which will focus on using your data for program expansion and sustainability. So if you have any questions specifically, please feel free to type your question into the chat box, and I'd love to kind of, provide comments or discussion around that. So I'll just kind of hang tight and see if anyone has any questions so far. Okay. Well, I'm not seeing anyone chatting so far, but Maddie, please just monitor and let me know if I should stop if someone ends up chatting.
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to type anything you think of into the chat box while we continue.
Okay. So using your data for program expansion and sustainability. This is kind of the fun part, the celebration part of your work. So once you've established a process for doing continuous quality improvement, you'll want to start understanding how you can use any data that you are capturing, whether through surveys or focus groups or a process evaluation, to tell the stories about what your program or organization does and why that is so important to help people continue to sustain your efforts. So making sense of your data. Before you can start telling your story with your data, you'll need to make sense of the data that you have. Begin looking at the data you've collected and either identify themes in your qualitative data and the patterns or trends emerging within your quantitative data. Quantitative data analysis is the analysis of numbers, which can yield factual information on attendance, changes in behavior, changes in knowledge. For example, this type of data is best displayed in the form of pictures such as charts or graphs. Performing data analysis requires calculating the data you have collected, and calculations could include the count or frequencies or percentages or rankings and averages. So this can be a way that when you're organizing your data, you're going to organize your data from numbers versus what people are telling you about the program, which is more the qualitative data set. So the analysis of the words and the pictures, this is best presented in words or videos, and that's the quantitative data. And this can include identifying themes, which is called, part of a coding process that highlights quotes that illustrate themes well, synthesizing the themes to show relationship among the different categories of the work that you do. So a lot of qualitative data can sometimes come out when you're facilitating a focus group. And you're hearing all of these different individual experiences, but at the end of the day, they all go back to the theme. They all have the same theme. So everyone might have a different experience in your focus group as it relates to getting access to affordable housing. Everyone's story might be different. Everyone had a different lesson learned within that. But at the end of the day, young people are struggling for affordable housing. So digging deeper into that and theming that up. So you're able to conduct data analysis in both ways, with the numbers and the stories, and then you're able to interpret your data. During the interpretation stage, you will examine the findings. Interpreting the data can be done in the context of answering the following questions. Are the results reasonable? How can the results be explained? What is surprising about the results? What might be missing? What implications do the results have for program improvement? If there are results you don't understand, there is an option for further research. It's also good practice to continue to explore and acknowledge the limitations of your own evaluation. Involving others can help ensure that your data is free from bias. Other important practices is to reflect on the positive or unexpected or negative results. Positive results highlight where your program's strengths are, motivate staff and stakeholders, and identify opportunities for future expansion. Unexpected or negative results are great opportunities for learning, framing recommendations, and modifying your practice. So telling stories with your data, just another fun graphic that really gets at the ultimate goal of how best to share data. In the next few slides, we'll explore a little more. So obviously you see in the picture on the left-hand side what you want to say, and then on the right-hand side what they're interested in. So the relevance is in the middle. So what you want to tell a funder about your program and how you share that story might not be what the funder needs to know in order to give you money. And so that's why it's important to have the data to back it up and make your story relevant to them or relevant to the cause at hand. Data animation and visuals. Oftentimes, data and evaluation is developed in traditional visuals. You see it within charts, bar graphs, scatter plots, and finding different ways. You could also do something that shows more about like a word cloud or infographics. There's also data dashboards, which dashboards are, as you're collecting data over time, they're actually able to take the information you're learning over a period of time and produce it in a more visual, appealing tool that helps you share back key performance indicators that you might identify in metrics on a regular basis. So at Youth M.O.V.E. National, data dashboards have been very helpful for us in our organization as we improved how we're tracking the technical assistance and support that we're offering. And so now we're able to document the technical assistance and support that we're offering in a little bit of a different way, so that when someone has a question, we're able to quickly access it and pull it up in a very pretty visual that will show us who we provided support to, on what topics, what is their frequency, and where the folks are located. And there's a bunch of other kind of important things that are important for us as an organization to know over time. And it's been very helpful in improving our internal process. So telling stories with your data. So developing a communication plan is really important. So you really have to understand to know your story. You have to think about engaging different audiences, and maybe different audiences require your message to be tailored. So if you're looking to recruit youth, your message might be different than when you're trying to pitch your idea to a funder. And so always being flexible and understanding, again, at the end of sharing your story, what is your ultimate goal? If the goal is to recruit a particular person or group to partner with you, versus if your end result is that you want someone to fund you, you must tailor your message appropriately. Identifying appropriate communication channels. So this is thinking about how you want to tell your story with data. So the best way is to have a blend of the qualitative, which is the individual lived experience, like impact, with the data. So always being able to tell your story and adding a statistic or a point really makes it compelling. And then you have to think about what is the appropriate communication channel. How do you want to share that story about your organization? Is it going to be in print? Is it going to be on video? Is it going to be in trainings? How would you like to develop and bring that out to your network? And then you'd want to create a communication product. Again, this could be creating infographics, utilizing your data and your organization's story to create kind of that one-pager, that visual that might help tell the story to the funder that you're looking to. Logic models can be a really great way to do that. So if you're able to create a really short, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is why we do it, and these are the results we've been seeing by doing it, it really makes it a short and sweet visual kind of way to create what story it is you're trying to tell and share that with your network. The next is to think about engaging your network. So this is how you would engage your network in making sense of the story and sharing the story. So thinking of champions within your network who can be integral parts of sharing your work with a broader audience. So as a Youth M.O.V.E. program, you might be collecting data and turning it into an infographic. And you want your funders to know that your work is worthwhile. And maybe there's a particular adult ally that you have that sits on a particular advisory board or committee within the state. Can they invite you to the meeting where you can hand out your infographic and talk a little bit about your success within your organization? Can you give it to them so that they have talking points on your behalf, so that you're making people aware of not only you're an amazing Youth M.O.V.E. chapter, but you do amazing work, and here's the data to prove that you do it, which can all help with sustainability. Social marketing is the marketing of behavioral change that benefits society as well as the intended audience. No, really, that's what it is. We always think of it being something that, you have to have a certain degree, a certain expertise in, but it really is a critical part of communicating with stakeholders, is developing that social marketing plan. So really thinking about how you're going to market what it is that you do and to whom. So here is a note on social media. While social media can be a great resource for disseminating evaluation results, it's not the same as a formalized social marketing plan. So just because you're on Twitter or just because you have, a clear kind of plan in place, they're not the same. So how can social marketing help you? Social marketing can help you develop stronger partnerships. It can help with audience engagement, and it can help with awareness building. So a social marketing plan helps to sustain an organization or movement. Leaders such as head of child serving agencies, staff, volunteers, for audience engagement, systems of care meet the needs of children with serious mental health challenges and their families. So what about your organization helps that audience? And how do you tailor the data you have with the story you're telling for them to hopefully sustain or replicate your program? So this next slide just kind of shows a little bit about the process for social marketing and the needs to be completed in full in order for your social marketing plan to be strategic. So again, it goes back to, have you clearly identified your goal? Have you clearly identified your audience? What your message is going to be, how you're going to disseminate your message, what activities, events, or materials, and how you're going to implement, and then evaluation and mid-course correction. So in order to do really strong social marketing, you see that there is an element of evaluation. If your goal and you're collecting data over time, again, if you've hit your mark, did you shift that behavior change that you're looking for within the audience that you're working? And so it shows greater impact. And again, Youth M.O.V.E. National has some very strong staff that specifically, really support with creation of social marketing plans, how to take your data and your story and create a plan to further your local efforts so that you can achieve the long-term sustainability and goal that you'd like. So here's an example from Vermont System of Care. So Vermont was a system of care a while back that really was focusing on some real innovative efforts. They weren't just working within the mental health system. They were also working with their public health division. Their system of care had a local evaluation team. The youth were a part, and they developed partnerships. So the young adults were a part of that local evaluation. They were able to help design the evaluation and participate in data collection and analysis. There was ongoing training and support and education. They were able to look at the data over time throughout their system of care. They were able to see what parts of the system of care were most impactful for youth and families, and they were able to see how they were able to blend the youth and family stories with the data for a sustainability strategy. So in Vermont, what they did was their grant was coming to an end, and there was no sustainability in place. Like there was no plan. Like at the end of the grant was ending, which meant that all of the youth that were actively involved weren't necessarily going to have a program that they could call theirs. So what they did was they took their evaluation data that they had. They took the data that the youth were collecting related to what they were doing as the youth-guided component of the grant. They worked together to craft their story, build awareness that the grant was ending and that there is a critical need for the grant to continue. And then they were able to go to the legislators and testify. And they were able to all individually bring the data and their personal experience in the story to the legislative folks. And it actually worked to their advantage that though the federal funds for the grant were going away, the state of Vermont decided to reinvest back into the system of care, and they made it a law that a percentage of the public health and mental health dollars are always going to go towards sustainable youth development activities and system of care. So over the course of their grant, they had the stories, they had the data, and they were able to kind of pull that together for a really strong sharing of the story to show impact and help them expand and grow. And now we're excited because during that time they weren't a Youth M.O.V.E. chapter, but because they were able to be sustained, the youth were able to organize, and now we have a Youth M.O.V.E. chapter in Vermont. So just goes to show the benefits of both the passion and lived experience, but when you pair that with the data, it definitely can really help you out. So with that being said, I'm going to jump to questions and see, Maddie, if anyone has any questions.
No, honestly, Bree, I did not know that we had a chapter in Vermont, so I'm really excited to learn that. I'll have to link me up with them. So if you have any questions about any of the things that Bree has talked about today with CQI, please feel free to go ahead and add those in the public chat. I would be happy to moderate them. Also, just a reminder that we will be sending out copies of today's presentation as a PDF, and you can download it from the file box.
Well, seems everyone is very quiet. I know we went over a lot of information today, and sometimes it takes a little while for the information to set in before you officially kind of have a question articulated. So feel free to kind of sit with the information, review the slides, and get back to us at a later date. You definitely know how to contact us, and I would be more than happy to chat with you a little bit more or talk about kind of where you are in your process and what supports and resources you might need to kind of move your program in a more data-informed approach.
Awesome. Thank you, Bree, so much for presenting for us today. That was excellent information. Like she said, this information is going to be available. You can click on the file box down there to download it. Also, please don't forget to take our survey. We have it there for you available in the public chat. It'll also pull up when we close out of our webinar for today. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. Thank you again, Bree, for talking to us about quality improvement. Again, if you guys have any questions or if you have ideas or maybe want to see some of these templates and see how that you could apply them to your own community, we would be happy to send those along. Bree, do you have anything else to add? Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us, and we will see you next time at Direct Connect.